are live on Facebook. Welcome everyone. My name is Jasmine Sandler. This is the Warrior Women in Business podcast. We are now on episode 29. And before we get started, I'm really excited. Today's podcast episode tails off of episode 28. For any of those of you that missed episode 28, we had Tamsin Fadal, a best-selling author on women and relationships and WPIX TV anchor for those of you here in New York who watch local television. And Tamsin has just recently written a book which is just coming out on transition, but it's particularly around from her journalistic background on interviewing people that have gone through transition, so life transition. So I thought a perfect guest today to tail off of episode 28 would be I gotta say, a role model in my life as a woman in business, and someone I really, really look up to, and I had the pleasure of working with and helping to develop her brand in her new venture, which is really cool, Mary Wallace Jaensch, and she's going to get into today the entire topic of transition in a time, honestly, it's such a turbulent time of change right now that women are changing at all levels, and Mary's going to get into that today and how she helps women who are, probably already had careers and now they're getting into that second career. So before I get into that, just a couple of announcements I would like to make here at Warrior Women in Business. So for those of you that are tuning in that have never heard of Warrior Women in Business, Warrior Women in Business was started a few years ago. I've been in the world of digital marketing for a very long time. And as a speaker in the industry, I saw more and more women looking to develop their careers and build their brands. And I saw a real lack of connectivity between women from that standpoint and an opportunity for them to mentor and help each other. So I started Warrior Women in Business with the mission of helping female entrepreneurs grow through the support and advice from those that have been there and done that, hence having Mary on today. And as part of Warrior Women in Business, we do a lot of cool things, I think anyway. I host events, including the Brand New Conference, which has been put off because of COVID, but hopefully will resurge in 2021. And but we move forward. So we have events, we have mentors and coaches on warriorwomenbusiness.com that you can take advantage of their brains. And we also host really interesting courses, one of which is coming up as of tomorrow. So I wanted to mention that. We have a fashion business masterclass for any of you that have toyed with the idea of starting a fashion design line or are already in the industry and are struggling to grow your brand globally. We have Tina Trevino, who is our fashion business masterclass certified Warrior Women in Business coach, leading that through 3 4-week sessions through the end of the year. So you can check that out. And then directly related to that, I have personally been working with Tina. It's how it all started, to start an idea that I had for a fashion line. I love fashion. And so Warrior Women in Business now has items. I'll be wearing one of them in our next podcast, but we're starting to design some really cool things that you'll see on the website. So that's a lot of information. I really want to get into today's podcast, but I just want to give those announcements. So first, I just want to say, thank you, Mary, for being available.
Jasmine, thank you for having me.
I'm
excited
today.
to be here.
My craziness of trying to get everything together today. So I wanted to just give everybody a little bit of a backdrop about Mary and why I asked her to be on, besides the perfect connect with Tamsin as of last time. So Mary, I've known for quite a while. Actually, we met through the Women's Leadership Exchange, I believe, right?
Correct.
Run by Andrea March, who's a really cool lady in the world of supporting women in business. I'll give her a shout out. So I met Mary and her business partner, both of which have become clients of mine and I think friends, and also are mentors to me. And so Mary has a really interesting background. She has been in the industry of helping women, both from a product standpoint, which she'll talk about, as well as working with women's businesses to help them grow from a corporate standpoint, as well as to now what she is involved with, which is helping women, I believe, individually to help them grow their businesses and help them with transition. What strikes me about Mary, well, a few things, but, is that to me, we all, when we're individuals in business, I'm the first one to admit it. It's difficult, really is, and you need this kind of army of women. And women have different skill sets. And what strikes me about Mary is her ability to keep things moving in a very operationally sound way. And I know as an entrepreneur since forever that that's a real sticky point for entrepreneurs to move on past year 3, year 5. And also as they're transitioning from a former corporate career into a new venture. So that's a bit about Mary. I think I'll start by asking you, if you would, to talk a little bit about, your, you've been working with women and women's products for some time. And how did you talk about, just share a little bit about your background in being a female partner in working with in women's products, a little bit about you to kind of set the stage for where you are today.
Sure, thank you. Probably the most important thing to know about me is that I am pruriently curious about other people and why they do things and how they do things. And that has sort of carved out my career. I started working for 2 consumer packaged goods company, one of which was Procter and Gamble, which gave me exceptional training in how to ask really good questions and then how to design ways to let people answer them, right? And actually hear them. And then I spent 20 years with Rachel, my business partner. I left corporate America, transitioned to being my first entrepreneurial venture. I've actually started 4 businesses.
Wow.
And worked about 20 years with Rachel, my business partner, who is still a partner in a small way with me, really delivering sort of advice and insights for primarily Fortune 100 brands, things like Johnson's Baby and Clean and Clear and Neutrogena, a lot of J&J work, both domestically and globally, of helping them understand how to talk to their customers in ways that were motivating and persuasive, as well as how to be innovative. So what were the new directions they should take? What kinds of new products or new ideas should they offer? Then Rachel and I founded, raised $20 million of venture capital and started a women's reproductive health business. We bought an asset out of bankruptcy the last time the world went crazy in 2008,
Yes.
And built a business and ran it for about 5 years and sold it. And that was quite an adventure. And then my most recent initiative has been, I finished that experience and realized that in many ways, it should have been sort of the penultimate of my career. Rachel and I were, and Rachel speaks a lot about this more than I do, but we really spent 5 years trying to get the conversation about female sexuality and female sexual health and female sexual satisfaction to be common, and discovered very quickly how difficult that was. It was one of the toughest conversations, and she's still working on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I came out of that and decided I wanted to do something different, and realized very quickly that for women of a certain age, there aren't a lot of resources. And I began to encounter other women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s even, who wanted to make a pivot. They wanted to do something different, no matter how successful they'd been. And they didn't really know how to do that. And that's sort of what I do now. So I've had this amazing opportunity to mentor women when I was working at Procter. So I had a primarily female team, and I actually am still in touch with many of those women who've gone on to have amazing careers. So that was my first experience of supporting women in transition. I've had the amazing opportunity to travel around the world, listening to women in cultures all over the world talk about things that are important to them, their families, their health, their dreams and desires. And then I've had this incredible privilege in the last 5 years of working one-on-one with women to sort of fulfill their own dreams and create their own legacies. It's been just an incredible blessing to have those opportunities.
Yeah.
You
Well,
want
I
me to
mean,
talk a little bit about partnerships versus solo?
yeah, that's what I was gonna talk about. I mean, obviously you have such a load of experience. We could go in so many directions. I mean, we could talk about innovation, we can talk about what women go through. Warrior Women in Business, we also like to support women in the homes and in their health and life, because it's just a part of being a woman. So we could talk about that, but I would like you to talk about, certainly, there's always these questions around whether you should have a partner, which you shouldn't have a partner, the pros and cons of that, and the strength of having a female partner versus a male partner. So can you talk about your experience there for those of you,
Sure.
those that
And
are thinking about?
I should point out that actually my first partner, my first consulting gig, which I started business, was actually a man, a dear friend. So I've had partners of both genders. And for me, having a woman as a partner ended up being really much more effective and productive for me. And I want to keep it personal because I think each of us are sort of
Yeah.
our own unique people. I think a lot of it depends on the kind of person you are. So I am a person who does better in dialogue, right? Bouncing ideas off of people, having somebody who understands enough about what I'm thinking about or trying to create. So I generate ideas and possibilities in interaction. So for me, a business partner was essential when I made the shift from corporate to my own thing, because I had this whole built-in infrastructure to give me that interaction, and suddenly I was on my own. The thing I learned about partnerships, I mean, Rachel and I have been partners now for over 25 years, which is terrifying that we're both, she'll be furious that I'm letting out how old we both are. But that's remarkable. I mean, there are a lot of marriages that don't last 25 years, and we laugh about that all the time. I think the most critical piece, two critical pieces that enabled our partnership to work as well as it did. One was, and this was based on learning from a partnership that didn't work that well. So it wasn't because I figured it out the first time, it's because I made a really big mistake and learned. It is absolutely essential that you and a potential partner are really clear with each other about what your business goals are and what your personal goals are. The hows and the whys that you do is great, but if you aren't at least very clear, you don't have to have identical ones, but if you're not really clear about why this is important to you and why you're doing it, it messes up all of the subsequent conversations, particularly the conversations when you've hit a bump in the road or you're facing a really difficult challenge. And Rachel and I have been through some bumps in the road, and we've been through some really big challenges, and we've always managed to get to a place that worked for both of us. And now you're going to say, but Mary, you gave that up and now you're working as a solo, which is absolutely true. And fortunately for both of us, after we sold the company, we wanted to go in different directions, and we could have that honest conversation without ever feeling like one was abandoning the other or that we were disadvantaging each other, because we'd had this track record of being really direct and straight with each other about what we wanted and what was important. And honestly, I wanted to try a new way of doing it. So going out on my own, and what I've discovered is exactly what you said. The advantage of being on your own is that you can do it exactly the way you want to do it. The disadvantage for someone like me is that I need a really good network of fabulous women that I can reach out to and bounce off of, and that can fill in for the places. I mean, we work together because what you do is something I don't know how to do.
Yeah, right.
And so you could support me in a way that was really critical and essential to creating my new brand. So that there are pros and cons to both. In some ways, having a partner is a little more challenging unless you're like truly very aligned about what it is that you want to do and how you want to do it.
Yeah. So question is on that. So how did you come across Rachel, and how did you develop this partnership?
It's a great story. So I was in partnership with this man, and we'd been working together for 2 or 3 years. And as part of our practice, I was freelancing for a marketing consulting group in Connecticut, a fairly large one. And in the course of that, and we're talking now the mid 90s. It was a pretty male, chauvinistic, and pretty, I won't say famous or infamous, but well known that it was more a male than a female organization. There were some women, but very few. And a partner came up to me one day and said, listen, we're interviewing this fabulous woman. Would you be willing to spend a little time? She's asked to talk to women that work here. Now, he never told me that he knew I was an employee. He never told me that they didn't tell Rachel I wasn't an employee. So we had this fabulous conversation. You know how you meet some people and there's just instant rapport and you have tons to talk about. Yes. And it was fabulous. And she decided to take the job. And she showed up for the first day of work and she's meeting everybody. And she says, oh, and where does Mary sit? And it was only at that point they told her I didn't work there.
Oh.
But what turned out to be even more remarkable is that she and her husband were renting a house that was less than a mile from where I lived.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So fate was sort of meant to be. So we worked several projects in the context of that company, realized that we worked really well together. And when she made a decision after her first child was born that she wanted to do something else, I became sort of a resource for her to, she was looking at other jobs. And one day she called me and said, I really just want to work with you. And it was, as they say, the beginning of a great partnership and a great friendship. So it was good.
I love that, and no, I know what you mean, when you meet someone and you just have this sort of alignment. I think, in my experience, just with starting to build Warrior Women in Business as a real entity, when everybody knows it's pretty new, Warrior Women in Business is only now really like a year old if I look at it as an entity, whereas I've been in business for 15 years or more. And on my own. And right. What I've found in my own experience is that with Warrior Women in Business, the more women that I meet that introduce me to more women that want to be on the podcast or just want to be involved, I'm finding just by being open and receptive to more women and having conversations with women that I would normally not have the time to speak with, the more of those connections are happening. And the more of those connections that are happening, the more women I'm thinking, maybe they could play a role in this piece of the business because it's fairly new. So I think it's about being open and it's about, looking for the women that you actually can connect with instead of, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but, reaching out for a traditional partner, which I've had so many of my friends or colleagues in business say, well, you should just go find a business partner. And then they give me some standard way. And it, for me, at least, never. And I did have a male business partner many years ago, and it did not work out at all.
Right.
And because I went about it a very traditional way. And I think, being more open and receptive in the context of the business environment that you're in seems to be a smarter way in terms of yielding better results, right?
Well, and I think you're tapping into something that there's at least a lot of conversation about, which is, are you going to come from a feminine energy of being open and receptive and curious and sort of let the world bring you what you need? Or are you going to operate from a more masculine perspective, which is, I have a plan, I'm going to go out, I'm going to be very logical, I'm going to be very reasonable. And, I've lived a lot of my life from the masculine perspective.
Yeah.
There is real value if you can sort of live with a little bit of messiness to just opening yourself and being curious and interested. And to your point, being a little more open to what people might bring that you hadn't even anticipated. I will tell you a story that, the moment I knew that Rachel and I were meant to be at least friends, if not partners at that point in time, was the first official project we worked on with this other company. we had to go to New Jersey and interview. We spent 2 days in a conference room interviewing different people as part of the project plan.
Okay.
And the first day at lunch, we looked at each other and we had the option of going to the cafeteria in sort of a dingy office building.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I noticed when we came down that there was a food store down the street. Do you want to just go pick up some food and we'll bring it back? And we said, absolutely. And we discovered total and complete food compatibility. And I don't know about any other women, but when you find somebody who eats like you do.
Oh, no, it's a big, I'm with you. Actually, that's no, that is so true. Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I want to give a shout out to Pomp and Whimsy. Oh God, I love their gin. So they have sponsored, I don't know, like every single one of my events. Let's put it that way. And I discovered gin because I just got, I don't know, I feel like my taste grew up or something. It's not like I drink a lot, but socially,
Right.
I really don't drink a lot because I'm a lightweight. But anyway, but when I found other women that drank gin, it was so weird. I was like, wow, you're in this special tribe, and you get to know people through interesting things, food, drink. I actually completely agree with that one.
Well, and it teaches you to be sensitive to the fact that rapport happens in other parts of your experience beyond your head.
Right. Yeah. It's not that, like, that's why I said, the partnership, it can't really be on paper in a checkbox.
Right.
And I don't know if it can be, so much quantified, right? When you're going to buy a business or merge a business or exit a business, it's kind of like this checkbox, and it's number based. And I don't think partnerships or women's connections and building business is a checkbox.
Okay. Well, and you have to anticipate that as a partner, there are going to be moments that are really hard.
Yeah.
And you have to have that trust level to have a really sincere, open, vulnerable conversation. Otherwise, you're just going to end up in a big mess that unfortunately too often ends up in court. And that's not useful for anybody.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think that's also a lesson in being an entrepreneur. As someone that deals with entrepreneurs every day, I think, I don't know about your experience in working with women in transition, but having them be as honest as they can in doing business with others. Otherwise, you can get into issues of, I've been in them, court issues or conflict. What do you have to say on that? What's your well, experience?
Again, I think, contracts are important because unfortunately the world still operates from a male perspective.
It's interesting.
And frankly, what a contract helps you do is, despite the fact they're written by lawyers, don't get me started, they are an opportunity to really talk through possible scenarios, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. And for you, at a minimum, to think through, how do I want to handle this? So it's a good way to structure a conversation about a specific transaction. Unfortunately, it's also become the way lawyers make a lot of money. So it often gets much more involved and convoluted than it needs to be. All that said, the truth is, underlying all that is, if you don't have trust in each other, a contract will not fix anything, right? Yeah. You'll just end up in a conflict that has to then go to court. And then the contract really just becomes, again, the framework for the conversation with the judge.
It does. You're right. That's interesting. All right. I want to shift a little bit into transition and innovation. I love the word innovation. I feel like I'm innovating myself every single day. But anyway, so it's true. But anyway, so this is such a time of transition. I'm so used to it. It's ridiculous, change and transition. You mentioned the recession of 2008/9, where the IRS knows I didn't even file for taxes because it was crazy. And I feel that these periods of transition in time, if you're in business or you're just in a career, it's just going to happen. And I think you need to safeguard yourself for it. And, you need to have a plan. So talk about, it's a global economic shift right now. It's a socio-economic shift right now. It's a race shift. There's so many shifts going on. So how do you talk about transition with your clients? How do you prepare them for transition? Talk about that.
Well, I think what's fascinating is for most of my clients who are women that have been really successful doing something for, 20 years plus, and something happens in their life. I'm not talking about a pandemic. The organization goes through a restructure and they don't get the job they expect. They get divorced, they get married, their children leave home, there's a health crisis. There's something that forces them, sort of like this pandemic, to stop for a moment and pay attention to how they're actually feeling. Are they still energized about what they're doing? And my clients often come up with the answer, no, this doesn't excite me anymore. This is de-energizing. This is exhausting.
Right?
I'm bored. It isn't doing for me what it did. And interestingly, for me, my clients, there's a lot of shame, right? Because why?
I understand.
How could this be? I think is part of what's sort of going on in some spheres around this pandemic, right? Like if suddenly the world has shifted and we are all forced to look at what we're doing and as importantly, how we are doing it. And the old answers don't work.
Yeah, no.
Often having nothing to do with us, right? It's just the world is working differently. There's a lot of shame about how could I be this competent, smart, successful person and not make this work, right? So the first step in transition is to step back and realize that uncomfortably, we actually don't control anything.
No, we actually control nothing.
Right. It's a complete illusion. And when things are sort of the same all the time, we get this sense that somehow we're actually in control of it, that there's causality, that we do this and that happens.
Yep.
So the first step in any transformation is to really let go of the sense that you are in control or that you are responsible for anything other than how you respond.
I love that.
So
that strips away everything that stops that, right? Because then it strips away the guilt. It strips away how you approach things. And it strips away also your so-called responsibility,
Right.
So
And it opens it up to, it creates a space to actually think about things differently. Right? What if there actually is another way to do it? My biggest role is often helping people see possibilities that are right in front of their faces, but they can't see them because the lens they have on doesn't allow them to see it. So it's about stripping off that lens. And so many times I have clients say to me, oh my God, there's so many, like I could go this way, I could do this, I could do that. The second is to understand that change affects each of us. There's a part of our brains that's, why as a species we survive, that really is uncomfortable and unhappy with unfamiliar. Right? Yeah. So we are designed that if something looks unfamiliar, there's a big caution sign. Like, of course. Don't do that. Don't go that way because we don't know if it's dangerous or not. The problem is that it wants you to keep doing it exactly the same way.
Yes. You get comfortable.
Right.
And you get conditioned.
Right. And the challenge is you can't grow, change, or innovate if you continue to just do it the same way. So by definition, I spend a lot of time with my clients saying, change is not comfortable. Like, even if you are choosing to make the change, even if you are, taking the action, it's not comfortable. And and we're geared to think that, you know, we'll know what the right thing to do is because it will feel right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. But if we went back and looked as kids, again, we were talking about before, I have 2 grandsons. When you watch little kids learn new things, it's not easy, it's not familiar, and they have to do it a bunch of times
Oh, yeah.
before they figure it out. As adults, for some reason, we walk around with this idea that somehow we should be able to do it immediately. It should be easy and comfortable and familiar, even if we've never done it before.
Mm-hmm. This is very true. So I'm glad you brought that up about the piece about how you know you're going the right way in transition. I think that is the scariest thing, right? For your clients, for clients I deal with, for anybody, you know. So can you give an example of a client that you work with? You don't have to name names, but you know, somebody that you worked with where they had that trepidation and they were able to get past that and their choices, and talk about their choices to get there.
So my very, very first client, her challenge was that she was a serial entrepreneur. And she loved being an entrepreneur. She never actually started anything. She'd been part of startups.
Easier.
And she was at a place where she had a job offer on the table.
Yes.
And as an entrepreneur going into a startup as the CEO, and she had gotten burned historically several times where, you know, she'd been hired with commitments to one set of compensation and had ended up with a different set of compensation. Concurrent with all this, every time she was in and out of one of these jobs, she had started a consulting business just to sort of get her by between gigs, right?
Yeah, I understand.
So she came to me and said, I have these 2 possibilities. I have this consulting job that really I don't love because I'm just responding to what other people want done, but it really generates a lot of money. And I have this offer on the table that's really exciting. It's what I want to do, and it doesn't offer the compensation I need. So how am I going to choose? And this is one of those things where I have a hypothesis. I'm not a neurologist in any sense of the word, but I have a hypothesis that when we're stressed, our brains try to reduce choice down to 2 things.
I think that would be smart of our brains to do.
Right.
Haywire.
But the problem is that often when we reduce it to 2 things, we've eliminated all kinds of possibilities.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So it shuts down our ability to actually come up with creative new ideas and solutions. So my response to her was, well, okay, how do we, and we did a whole lot of work around sort of what really actually motivated her and made her happy. That's a whole process that I run for them so that they're much more conscious of not just what they want to do, but how they want to do it, because that's actually a much bigger piece of what makes us feel happy and fulfilled. We tend to focus on what we do as opposed to how we do it. And the truth is that how we do it often has, and we're learning that in this pandemic, right? Right? Because we've all had to change how we do it. And
absolutely.
Some of us love being isolated in our homes and some of us don't. And
yes, of course.
Right? So it changes the whole experience. Anyway, so we spent first optimizing. My question to her is, why is your consulting business only about responding to what people ask you for?
Hey, that's a good question.
Okay, what if you designed your consulting practice so that you actually were working on things that were interesting to you? And how can we structure an offer for the job that meets your needs? And let's look at sort of what responses you get. And what was interesting was her initial path ended up actually working on developing the consulting business in a way that made her happy because the people didn't respond to the job offer that would have made her happy. And 6 months later, she got the perfect offer.
Wow.
for a CEO job that she's still doing 7 years later, that she could structure to make her happy, you know, to be the job in which she was doing it the way she wanted to do it. So again, just getting conscious. First of all, never accepting that there's only two options. Okay. If your brain has gotten you to there's only two options, you need a different process to help you realize that there's always infinite options. And there's at least two other good ones. I always say that to my clients. If you've gotten to two, there's always at least two other ones that are equally as good. And the second thing is to understand that the better you get at what it is that makes you happy, the more often those opportunities show up.
Yeah.
So when I talk to people in transition, I'm like, first give up any thought that you control any of this. The only thing you control.
That's a beautiful one.
Yeah. You only control how you respond, except that as much as we would like it to be different, change is uncomfortable. If you are feeling uncomfortable, you are doing the work you need to do to make the change. That's a good signal, not a bad one.
And let me ask you, so when someone's feeling uncomfortable, how do they, when you talk about choosing that response, which you've talked about a few times, so how do they mentally choose a response that's not going to hurt them when they're going through that uncomfortable?
So what I say is follow your curiosity.
Okay. Yeah.
Curiosity is one of the easiest ways to discover what actually your path might be. So most of us are trained to, I'm going to pick a path. I'm going to set milestones. I'm going to have a goal.
Right.
A very male, very male approach.
Yes.
Very straight line.
I do have a boyfriend.
Yeah.
He's like, we're going to do it this way.
Right.
I'm like, really? Can't you think outside of the box, please?
So another way to think about it. Right. No.
Yes. But it's important to have both perspectives.
Yes. Another way to do it is to say, what am I curious about? And what if I took one action to learn more about what I'm curious about? And if I'm still curious, I will take another action. And if I'm still curious, I will take another action. And suddenly, several things have happened. One, I'm getting very energized pursuing something that actually is intriguing and interesting to me, which is always.
And that gives you the energy you need. Yeah.
Right. Second, you're getting smarter about it. So you have more visibility on how you might navigate through it in a way that's meaningful to you. Third, you're meeting other people who have a shared interest. It's where we were a few minutes ago, right? You found a community that likes to drink gin, right? You found a community. And often when you're doing a pivot, like in a job, you don't have a network.
No.
So you have to build a network.
Yeah, I mean.
Right. And
well, that's what I'm trying to do.
Right. And a lot of people will say to me, well, I hate networking. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, right.
So be curious. If you are learning about something that interests you, you will naturally be attracted to people that share the same interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're not networking, you're building a community, a network that will create opportunities you can't see or even be aware of at this point in time.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it takes this much action initially.
Oh.
Right? So you don't
I like that.
Right? It's get off the I laugh all the time. I'll be sitting on my sofa. I know I should walk, always a big danger signal.
Should and try are the two worst words, I think, personally.
And literally you can try this, take something you should do.
Yeah.
Put it in your head.
Laundry.
And within 20 to 30 seconds, your brain will come up with 7 reasons why it's not a good idea right now. So
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? If you don't want to do something.
Right? So my solution to that is I never say I should walk. I say, sit up. Okay. Put your shoes on. Open the outside door. And by that point, you are moving, right? Yeah. You're walking.
Motion. Mm-hmm.
I don't have to argue with my brain of whether this is a good idea or not.
Yeah.
So take small cumulative actions.
Yeah. I mean, it's, making a transition in a career or making a transition. A lot of the clients that I work with are going to start a business, and I'm doing entrepreneurial coaching. It's a big change. And it's funny in my work, like I have a couple of clients now, and I don't even take them on. I asked them, I said, well, what's your real goal? Because they're so quiet about it. Oh, I just want to build my brand. I'm like, no, I'm a no BS type of person. So I say, what's your real goal? Well, I'm thinking I might leave this company, because they're concerned it's a big change. And I say, okay. And my answer is, let's do something microscopic.
Right.
Because if you do something microscopic and you focus in on that, then you can get to the next level. Right. And that's kind of what you're saying. So in that, I love what you have to say. I love the piece, about having more opportunities than you realize. I think a lot of people get stuck in that. So in that, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about personal innovation and how do you look at innovation? Because innovation is a traditional corporate word, right? So, but how do you look at innovation from a personal perspective, from a career development perspective?
Yeah. So I was really, really fortunate that 5 years ago, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, and I realized I was in this conundrum of, I knew how to pick a goal, build a plan, set benchmarks, and go. None of which works if you don't know where you're going.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. And so then you're in this terrible stuck of, well, how can I make a plan if I don't know where I'm going? And how do I figure out where I'm going without a plan? Like, it's just, there's no way out of it. And there's a set of tools that I was introduced to, not for this, but for sort of corporate innovation, that was developed probably 10 years ago now at Stanford University. And it's been really developed at the business school at the University of Virginia. And it's been used by a lot of corporate people. And it's language that many people are familiar with. It's called design thinking.
Design thinking, okay.
And it was developed to come up with an alternative way for innovation. So a lot of innovation, particularly in corporate, started with, figure out the unmet need and take what you know and make a new solution. Again, a very straight line.
Yeah, right.
This is where I'm going. I'm going to solve this problem. Okay. Design thinking starts in an entirely different place. It starts with, what is the current experience? And where are there opportunities to improve that experience? And what are the problems we have to solve to improve those experiences? So I'll give you, for example.
Okay, good.
There was a design thinking project done in Belgium. The government agency that delivered meals to seniors realized that most seniors barely ate any of the food that they gave them, right? Because that would be like Meals on Wheels. It would be delivered.
Okay,
it's all run through the government. And so they had a hypothesis that the foods weren't the right kinds of food, or that, there's something about the foods. So they hired a design thinking team to go in and look at what was going on. And what the design thinking team came back and said is, it has nothing to do with the food. These people are living in their homes by themselves. The part of the process they like is the visiting of the people who are delivering the meals.
Right.
So don't change the meals.
It's not the meals.
Create a service that allows people to spend 20 minutes to 30 minutes with each person they deliver to, because that's the experience. So the innovation happened around how it was done, as opposed to the specific thing that was actually delivered. So when I work with my clients, I say to them, we're not going to start with what you do or what you want to do. We're going to start with, when you're doing this amazing new thing, whatever it is, how do you want to feel? And we use some of the design thinking tools to create a list of what will be essential in that experience for them to feel good. And then we take their interest areas, their skills and experience, and those design criteria, and we generate ideas. And what happens, of course, is that, I mean, I have a client right now. She's wonderful, and she's really smart and capable. And she's been in sales for Xerox. She's currently in sales for relocation, which, needless to say, is an industry that's a little bit depressed at the moment.
I don't even know what's going on with that.
Right. And so she's looking for a transition. And we went through the whole thing, and we laid out some really cool things. And the second conversation we had, she said, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I think I want to sell high-end cars. I love high-end cars. I'm like, I don't think you're crazy at all. Like, that's really cool. But it had never occurred to her that she could take something that she really enjoyed, take her skills and her experience, and create a job opportunity. So that, I think innovation happens when you give yourself the chance to look at the problem from a different vantage point.
Yeah. And also looking at it from another vantage point. And I like that you talk about looking at it as an experience, not just what do you do and what do you want to do and what did you do? Yes. And innovation, it's also kind of tying it into that feeling, right? Tying it into the feeling of, well, you like this, like, we're launching this fashion brand. And the reason why is because I was talking to Tina. I said, I have this really killer idea for a fashion brand. I actually used to own a dog clothing company. You don't even know that about me. But anyway, I've done so much stuff. So I said, she said, well, you could make this part of your current experience. And it is looking at that. And every day that I have the chance to work on that, I'm really energized, because it's just a small, like you said, it's a small shift within a current framework. It's really interesting. And a lot of women out there, I think, can benefit if they're in the transition and they, like you had said, maybe they're uncomfortable because they've been in a job for 20, 25 years, right? And now is, I think, a good time for women to think about what they enjoy. Like, I've always wanted to do something in fashion, right? And I don't have a background in it. So, this is a good time to innovate. And like you said, look at that skill set and see how can that skill set be used in the innovation.
Right.
So I think
and the truth is most of us are everything has changed so much that everybody's feeling uncomfortable anyway. So if you're going to feel uncomfortable anyway, at least focus on creating some opportunities and people say to me, to your point, how do I know that I'm not making a mistake? And I'm like, if you feel energized, if you feel excited, if you are curious and pursuing that curiosity, you are on the right track. I don't know exactly where it's going to take you, but you are on the right track.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, the energized, and I mean, transition is a good thing. Innovation is a good thing. It's how businesses have thrived. I always go back to grad school and I always bring out case studies. It has nothing to do with social media. And I don't, it has to do with innovation. It has to do with, like you talked about, curiosity and transition.
Right.
So when we, I just want to know if you can give a couple of tips to women that are approaching change right now. What are like just a couple of tactical things? Because, you've given great information. A lot of it is strategic, right? Yeah. We're both strategists. So a couple of tactical things a woman can do if she's considering approaching change. Like, for example, the woman that you introduced me, I had a conversation with her and I realized that she wants to change, but she's not ready for someone like me yet, because she has to decide what her brand is going to be about, see if she wants to commit to it, right? So what are a couple of things a woman can do if she's thinking, wow, Mary's right, I shouldn't be afraid, I should go after this, but I don't really know what to do. So what are a couple of things?
Well, I think the first thing to start with is to start being much more conscious of where your curiosity leads you. Okay. So most of us are not comfortable without a plan.
Oh, yes.
So I will often tell my clients, keep a little journal for a week of all the things that make you smile and all the things that you casually Google.
Casually what?
Google, right? That
Casually
you are
Google.
you're motivated to
Oh
find.
my God, this is such a fun exercise. I think everyone needs to do this. I'm going to send this out afterwards.
Okay. So
Yes.
you just get yourself a little place, either keep it electronically or write it down just for a week.
Okay. It's not a long
Anytime
time.
you smile, anytime you find yourself doing a search that has nothing to do with a task,
Oh, how
it's
nice.
just you're curious.
Okay.
And when you get done at the end of the week, stand back and look at, is there a pattern? Is there a set of topics or questions or areas of interest? And then the next step is to say, what am I curious about and how could I get more information about it?
Okay.
Can I talk to somebody? Can I take a course? Can I read a book? What's one more action I could take to pursue this curiosity? Because often that's a way that part of us that feels unexpressed is trying to be heard. But we're being so logical and so task driven that we miss the signal. So that's my first thing is curiosity. If you're feeling like you don't know what direction to do, just give yourself some space to pay attention to what makes you curious.
Okay.
The second one is to understand that if you are feeling exhausted and de-energized, and can't imagine that you have the energy to make the change, right? Which a lot of people will say to me, I'm so exhausted. How am I going to have the energy to make?
But can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is actually really important. So, do you think they're exhausted from stressing out about making the change, or exhausted from doing what they were doing before that they weren't happy with? It's just such an important question.
Yeah, they're bored, right? And doing what they've been doing the same way they've been doing it is exhausting.
Yes.
Okay. And so they have to recognize that exhaustion is a signal to try one small thing that will feel a little unfamiliar, but will get them back into exploring new. So think about it this way. The front of our brains love to learn new things. That's what energizes us.
Yeah.
The part of our brain that wants to keep us safe wants us to keep doing it the same way. So it is a tension between feeling familiar, comfortable, and bored and unenergized, and feeling uncomfortable, stimulated, and learning new things. So if you are feeling bored and stuck and exhausted, find some place in your life that you can try something small, non-threatening, that's different. Minimum, drive home a different way. I mean, just find places in your life that you start to stimulate the front of your brain and the energy comes back. You don't wait for the energy. You actually create the energy.
Okay.
And most people don't realize that. They keep waiting for when they're going to have the energy to look. So those are my two. If you are thinking about a transition and it's feeling really hard or you're feeling really stuck, those are two ways to sort of activate being able to take the next step. Okay.
Then the last question I have, I'm checking Facebook to see if there's any questions.
Yeah.
So the last question I have for you is related to that. So if someone starts to make, because a transition can be scary for a number of reasons, but I would dare say a transition can be very scary from a financial perspective. And I don't want to ignore the big elephant in the room today, that the economy is we're going through a time that is so scary.
Yeah.
From a financial perspective, that people, to make a transition that they might not be able to afford their their lifestyle. So how do you have advice for women that, like you said, they start to make a change in a direction, but maybe it's not making money yet? How do they transition out of something that's paying them into
Right.
something that's not paying them?
Right.
How much time do you think that they should give themselves, or any pointers on that? That is such a major issue right now with everyone I talk to.
Right.
So can you talk
So
about
I think the first thing you have to do, and I do this with a lot of my clients, is before you start figuring out what you're going to do, figure out what you need. So what's your real nut? Okay, because most people don't really know what their real nut is. If you want to live where you're living, if you want to have certain amenities, really figure out what that looks like on a monthly basis. And for most of my clients, it's 50 to 60% less than they think they need.
Yeah.
Okay, so when they look at the flexibility they have, depending on your specific financial situation, the first step is like eliminate the uncertainty. Like figure out what it is you really need to live.
Yeah.
And figure out what you need to live for 6 to 12 months. What's the nut? Okay, because unless you do that, it is going to just be.
Yeah, you have to have a budget. Oh my
right.
God.
Well,
how can you live without a budget?
Yeah, well, but I know myself, when I get really anxious about it, I literally put a spreadsheet together, and even if the news is ugly, I feel better because at least I feel like I know what is.
Yeah, me too.
And I can start generating possibilities of what other sources of income can I create? Because I know that I need this much, not because I have some idea that I'm not going to have enough. Okay. So that's the first thing, like just figure it out. And then look at, could you work part-time at what you're doing now to give yourself the time and space and survive?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there ways to allocate 20% of your time to this new opportunity and do it with other people? Volunteer, get involved with an organization that's giving you training and access to contacts without having to. The truth is there's 100 ways to do it. But most of us, again, get fixated on, I either have to continue what I'm doing or I have to jump off a cliff and do this.
Yeah, right.
And take all this risk.
Yep.
There are always at least 20 other possibilities. And so if you find yourself there, figure out your nut, sit down with 2 or 3 friends, colleagues, people who are really good idea people, and brainstorm a variety of ways that you can start down the path and without having to jump off a cliff.
I love it. That's really, really helpful, because it certainly gets like that, because you're going into a new world and you might love it. I mean, the Google search, I love that you said that, because, I'm a musician on the side, and it's my love. And I find myself studying music theory until 3 a.m. every night. I don't care. It's my time, and I know it's what I love, and I try to bring in music, to Warrior Women in Business.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, these things are important. You got to do what you enjoy, but do it in a way that's logical. So I love this journal idea, and I'm going to put that out there to the audience. Cool. to try that. I also think, that having some type of group session through Warrior Women in Business for you to help, if you're interested, lead something.
Would love to.
Because I think you're just such an excellent facilitator, and it's not a one and done, and sometimes it's hard for women to do it on their own. So if you're open to that, I can put a poll out and see who might be interested. If you're listening right now and watching right now, and you're interested in having Mary lead something for the group, just let us know. We're happy to put some, I'm happy to help put something together. I think that might be really interesting. Because you've given, it's already 4 o'clock. We don't have any questions, but people usually send questions later. So,
sure.
completely fine. And I think that could be a next step for us.
Perfect. I would love to do that.
Okay, great.
Would love to do it.
So we're up on 4:00. So for those of you that RSVP'd for this, we're going to be sending you something. For those of you that just, maybe you just tuned in for a few minutes and you have some questions, feel free to shoot over an email to info@warriorwomenbusiness.com with any feedback, any questions for Mary. I'm happy to pass that along. And I want to thank Mary for her time, energy, and making us all feel more comfortable about transition, change, and innovation in a time where it's, like you said, Mary, it's necessary.
Right.
It's necessary. And if you ignore it, you're going to get lost in the dust. So, I mean, I really hope that people really take advantage of the years of experience and solid experience that Mary has. So we're going to be editing this, and this will be available on Warrior Women Business Apple, as well as, Spotify and SoundCloud and all of our other channels. And again, Mary, I really want to thank you. This has been I've learned so much today.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. And I'm sure we'll have you back, and I'm sure we'll have you facilitate something. If not offline, certainly online.
Sounds good, my dear. Sounds good.
All right. So this is Jasmine Sandler, again, signing off for Warrior Women Business. Again, we have a fashion masterclass coming up. We have a new fashion line coming out. We have other programs all at warriorwomenbusiness.com. If you're interested in being a podcast guest, reach out to us through the website. And I hope everyone enjoyed today. Have a wonderful week. Signing off.